We would do something like East Palestine. And I'm going to let Tom describe the motivation behind creating this chart because we have a potential client that we met with, and they are in railroads. And of course, they had a keen interest in the East Palestine train derailment. And so I'm going to let Tom talk us through it. And Tom, are you or Chad going to share your screen and show the whole chart? What would you like to do?
I plan to share my screen if that's all
Good.
right, Rob. And Chad, I don't know if you want me to or you want Rob to later on, but I thought I'd kick it off. If that's all right.
You can kick it off and I can just talk anywhere where where I did work and you want me to explain what I did. So
Very good.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share. First, I put together just a couple of PowerPoint slides, so I'll kick off with those.
Fantastic. This is a massive undertaking, and I'll remind everyone that we actually broke ChatGPT $200 a month version trying to do this initially. So uh, it's been interesting.
Okay, so everybody sees welcome to
Yep.
historic East Palestine, Ohio, where you want to be, right? Well, you
Hmm.
probably didn't want to be in East Palestine, Ohio on February the 3rd, 2023. It made national news, and the reason for it is you're going to see in just a few minutes. Because, is what happened, there was a derailment, and that derailment looked like this, and that was not good. So, what happened, as Rob started to mention, is was a there was a train that was traveling carrying almost 200 rail cars, and that train moved along the from Ohio towards Pennsylvania through East Palestine, Ohio, and had a derailment. And as we go through this, there won't be or shouldn't be too many surprises. But Norfolk Southern had a train that derailed in Ohio after a roller bearing overheated. The axle separated from the one of the cars, and that axle separation then, although it was detected, it was dispatched, and there was an alarm that sounded. The emergency response did not stop the train in time. There were inoperable communications. The command post placement was poor. The hazmat capability was inadequate and unprepared. And a few days later, there was a decision made to vent and burn some of the chemicals that were in the rail cars, and because they contained vinyl chloride. And with declining temperatures and manufacturer objections, and there were potentially evacuations, and quite a few people were evacuated, thousands. There was environmental harm and major incident costs. All of that they vented anyways. So we start with the problem statement, as you can see in the upper left, just like every Blue Dragon starts with that. And we proceeded to, I'll blow this up a little bit more so that most people can see it. We came up with 9 timelines. So some of the trainings that we all went through, including me, had much fewer timelines, a minimum of 3, but 9 timelines going everything from hazmat classifications, Norfolk Southern themselves, some detectors, and I see Rob's pointing some of those out. We also had emergency responses that didn't go so well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The decision to burn the chemical and cause a lot of harm, by the way. Anyways, I'll just slide across slowly. As you can see, starting back in 1990 to 2023, these timelines were all applicable. And what ultimately was determined by the NTSB was that this little bearing right here uh, caught fire And after it caught fire, strata, strategically or catastrophically, that's the word I was looking for, catastrophically uh, deteriorated, and it burned up this entire, disassembled this entire rail wheel system. And that entire wheel system then came apart, and that's what caused then 38 cars to derail. I'm just going to keep sliding across here. We had to keep adding the timelines in because there was so much information that was included that we had, we just kept adding and adding and adding. And February the 6th was the day that the decision was made. And right here is the determination, or at least the identification, that the burn decision was made. And as I continue to slide across, it continues on for days. And in fact, this investigation is still underway because some of the environmental impacts are still being worked on by various organizations. And I'll just talk briefly about that. But as I zoom back out again, and Rob, I'm not nearly as proficient at doing this as you can see that this stretches even for in Lucid Spark quite a ways as far as what we were able to determine. And Rob, Chad, and I, the three of us, worked together on this, but we put in probably at this point less than 30 hours part-time. So after we came up with the problem statement and came up with using some of our critical thinking and some of these timelines, some of the data analysis, then of course we moved over into the systems inventory. Now I'm starting out here because this is a condensed version of the systems inventory. And I recall in some of the practices and some of the things that Rob had us do in class, look how look how detailed this is by us using some AI prompts that Rob and Chad provided in order to determine, and I'll show you in a moment, how the expanded inventory is that we used in order to do this data analysis. But that's just the condensed version. Then I worked on putting together the key stakeholders analysis, and these are just a few of the 68 individual key stakeholders, as well as the 30 plus organizations that were involved, everywhere from Norfolk Southern to federal agencies like the NTSB, as well as industry bodies, research, and the communities themselves. So, and I'll show you the 68 individuals that we collected as well. And if we would have had an opportunity to talk to them, then we would have. Some of them were talked to by other organizations, but were not talked to by us. Again, this was a training opportunity for us to take a look at, could we really deal with something that was this complex? And the answer is absolutely yes, we could. So after a little bit of digging, we found that the tapered rolling bearing, which I showed you, led to the catastrophic failure of the system, the wheel system. And we came up with 10 questions that we are going to show you in a minute, and Chad will talk about that. But some of the bigger root causes, or bigger causes, I'll just call them that, or apparent causes, were this wayside hot bearing detector. And the NTSB only requires that, or they only suggest that this hot bearing detector is positioned every 15 miles on the rail. And the rail that this particular train was traveling on, these detectors were 19 miles apart, in some sections 30 miles apart. So
Tom, real quick, Tom, when you're talking about the pictures, can you zoom in real close on the pictures? Because that's
sure,
very interesting. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, as you go across, show the big pictures.
Well, maybe too big.
There we go.
Anyways,
That's good.
how's
That's
that?
perfect. Yeah, great.
So this was the detector that found that there was a problem, but for different reasons, people didn't pay attention. The detectors were too far apart, etc. Those were definitely contributors. As I move across, also, I didn't realize this till we did this analysis. There are acoustic bearing detectors as well. And we located or found that as early as 2022, this particular car had been identified as having noisy bearings, meaning that there probably was a problem, but they had not taken the actions that would be required in order to investigate and see if there really was a problem, which later on it became obvious that there was. So I'll zoom back out again. The tank car, this is one of the tank cars. And you can see that look good on the left, not so good on the right. And there was a breach during the accident, as well as there were man-made breaches or explosives that were added to the cars in order to open up the cars so that they could be vented and then exploded to hopefully, which was not entirely successful, hopefully get rid of some of the chemicals and some of the chemicals that were of issue. These are some of the other pieces, protective housing. The picture at the bottom is another view of the one that I had shown you. And you can see the NTSB did a pretty good job gathering all of this data, which we took a few hours, again, less than 30. NTSB is still doing some work, and they didn't release this report, I think, until July. So it took them months in order for them to come up with what they eventually published. Another thing that was pointed out was these hazard materials placards. These placards, as well as the identification of whenever the materials that are being put onto trains, this hydrogen chloride was not a red line in order to have this train deemed or determined to be a highly flammable or a train of concern. And therefore, that's one of the reasons that contributed again to why this accident occurred. And I won't go through all of these, but those are some of the bigger items that were pointed out. I'll zoom back out to show you that PPE, although not a contributor to the accident, was a contributor to some of the humans having difficulties. And those studies are still underway. And I'll show you some of the results that have been found so far. And one other big contributor is that there was a lack of communications even after 9/11 and everything we learned about having emergency management and emergency response, being able to be on the same notification system and sharing information as well as sharing equipment. That did not occur. And still, even in 2023, and I would assume even today, we still continue to have additional difficulties with communications, which in my experience in Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and my last job in the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, that has always been an issue of the communications has been a contributor to having difficulties in accident responses. I won't talk about any of these surveys other than point out we found 14 surveys that that were either directly or indirectly conducted or under investigation right now about this particular accident, starting from the University of San Diego as part of a conglomerate. It's studying and putting together some community work on what happened. One of the things I'm going to talk about in just a moment before I turn it over to Chad is the assessment of chemical exposures. There are a lot of chemical exposures that happened then and continue today, and the aftermath is continuing and being investigated as well. So here's the NTSB, here's the EPA, here is FEMA. Norfolk Southern also paid to have a contractor do some work for them. They did a safety assessment. There was another couple of studies that were done to investigate. The Department of Labor actually even got involved. The University of Kentucky was involved. Pennsylvania became involved. The National Academy of Sciences needed some work, I guess. Or, I'm just kidding. They're enough. But the National Academy of Sciences did some work. NIH did some work, and there are ongoing health issues that are being researched by Case Western Reserve, even as we talk even today. So before I go down and mention just a few more things and finish up my section, because it's a rather big investigation. One area that we're looking into is fault tree analysis, and Chad is leading that. Here is the complete systems inventory that you can see, and I'll zoom in just a little bit, but it is massive. And you can see that everything from the pre-departure inspections all the way up to the Norfolk Southern Mechanical Department here and everything that went into that. Also, from the key stakeholders, I promised, this is the analysis of the key stakeholders, and there were 68 that were identified. We may have, if we were given this opportunity, we may have even found more, and I'm sure that we would have, going again everywhere from the Norfolk Southern Railway people and who specifically for them we would expect to talk to, down to the NTSB, the manager that did the investigation in charge. Again, 68 different investigations we would have done. Our expectation is at least 2 sessions that would have been organized into 8 to 12 people. Oh, didn't mean to do that. That with multiple sessions for some of the more pertinent and those that were more directly involved. So now I'm going to zoom back out again. I'll slide over to the left. There's still a lot of room, as you can see, in order to do a lot more analysis. And I'm sure in all of Chad's his free time, he would be excited to do that. And I'm looking forward to doing some more as well. But I haven't, we haven't gotten to it again, doing this part-time. So Chad, just before I get this back to you, I'm going to go back to my slides and give a couple bottom line items that I was able to put together. For example, the event itself, 38 rail cars were involved. 5 had this vinyl chloride that was deliberately vented, burned. $1.7 billion with a B in Norfolk Southern expenditures to date. They're not done yet. So this is very costly for that company. And it's also very timely that we're bringing this up today. If you saw over the weekend, Northern Southern or Norfolk Southern also had another train derailment over the weekend. It was in Georgia. Not as massive, and they have the rail system back up and running again, at least the rails themselves. But apparently they haven't learned their lesson, because rail cars are still being crashing or falling off the rails even as we speak over the weekend. Initial problem was we had 15 overlapping system failures, and I'll talk briefly about those. The test itself had 15 phases, or 15 phase 1 systems were in phase 1. We triple verified all of the factual claims that we made. We produced some actionable lines that Chad will talk about momentarily, and we identified where the interviews for the phase 2 would begin. So here are the 5, or at least 5 linked failures that were caused by the disaster. We had the bearing failure talked about, detection gap. There were alerts that were sent, but there was only a single analyst that was on duty, and that was a known problem that they were having manning issues. And so even though the alarm sounded, they did not detect it in time. The derailment occurred 38 cars, 11 were hazmat tanks. There was a breach, and they also did the breach on their own, self-ignited, and there was a pool fire that ignited and caused some environmental damage. The venting and burning occurred 3 days after the accident, and the NTSB later determined that it wasn't even necessary. So here's some numbers about why standard incident reviews would have not have been sufficient and why it took them, with all their resources in the NTSB, almost 6 months in order to make this first report. 1.7 billion money spent to date by Norfolk Southern. There were 43,000 aquatic animals killed in the streams, and those were mainly minnows and things like that. There was a significant amount of gallons of vinyl chloride, 115,000 that were released when they initially had the catastrophe, as well as during the venting and burning. 222,000 tons of soil had to be removed, and that was as of March 2025, maybe more since that time. They evacuated 2,000 residents in 5 days, and the NTSB came up with 34 recommendations that they're still following through now. I won't go in much detail on this slide at all, but I just wanted you to see that there were a number of forensic dimensions that we took a look at, and we used Blue Dragon protocols in order to analyze them. And the primary defenses that should have stopped the accident but did not were the detectors that I pointed out to you. They were not federally, there are still today no federal spacing standards that might prevent future derailments in the future. The bearing maintenance noisy fault in 2022 I mentioned, that particular bearing had been reconditioned in 2011. So it had been operating for almost 15 years before the accident happened. The train was not properly hazmat classified for different reasons. The decision was only given, the people on the site were only given 13 minutes to decide. Can you imagine that? Something this catastrophic and this significant, they only gave the IC 13 minutes to decide whether or not to do this, which turned out to be wrong, but to do this action or not. The emergency response, they didn't have enough training, and they put and established the command post only 400 feet from the hot zone, from the fire itself, while it was going with all these other things going on. So one thing that I didn't point out, but the Norfolk Southern wasn't able to provide any of the training transmitted. They were not able to transmit or give the cargo manifest to the first responders after the derailment for some time. There were a number of health items that were found. 94% of the respondents said they had either new or worsening symptoms, and that was since 23. 78 said that they had PTSD, post-traumatic stress dimensions or indicators, anxiety, sleep disruption. 73% of the East Palestine people said, and they only have a little over 4,000 there, I think, to begin with, they had Gulf War illness symptom type profiles, and 85% said that they had anxiety, muscle pain, and low energy 2 years after the derailment occurred. So as you can see, there's a lot going on still 3 years plus after the derailment. So just 3 takeaways, and then it's over to Chad. Blue Dragon absolutely scales to something this significant and this costly, $1.7 billion. Proactive deployment is always cheaper. Just ask Norfolk Southern. And the evidence is about all the money that was done and spent and continues to be spent. And absolutely, it's imperative that be disciplined to not start asking why until you get to the phase 2, never in phase 1, so that you can do comprehensive and due diligence in analyzing the data. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over to Chad and Rob, And thanks for the opportunity, Rob, for talking about this interesting investigation using Blue Dragon.
Yes, sir. Quite the challenge, right? But with a small team of three, and primarily Chad and Tom in the lead, we were able to put this together in a fairly short amount of time. And if we only had access to the humans in the system, we'd already be started on phase two. All of that would have been done very quickly. Chad?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Tom, you did an amazing job. Everyone was going round of applause. There's an applause thing where you can send all kinds of balloons up his thing. He definitely has done many briefs in his past. The only things that he didn't get into that uh, we said was the last section where we're going to set up phase two. We still have some areas above the top where we can go in and add in the symptoms. So if you remember, if it's a bearing or something like that, we're choosing questions ourselves, so there's not going to be symptoms. But we had plenty of details as far as the information for lines of defense, and then ultimately aligning everything underneath the bearing maintenance, inspection, and wayside detection. So again, the thing I loved that AI helped us do, again, when we looked at the people, the systems inventory of the people that we needed to be at to go do this, again, it broke it down to the role level, the working level, the supervisor level, the mid-manager level, the executive level, so that we could better tailor who we would want in those briefs so that we could make it more efficient. A lot of organizations, they like Rob's pointed out in the past, they want to go do one-on-one interviews with these people, and whoever that person's in basically putting bias into it, the investigators putting bias into it, and then they got to go back after they've written it all down in their notebook. Whereas we're doing it all live in front of them, if we can get them over uh, and in a classroom or some kind of setting, so we can ultimately get through it. But there's 187 questions total. So typically it would take about, and I'm basing this off of examples from Rob when he did the 2,000 person site-wide investigation where they had 130 questions. It took him 4 days to do that. So it would probably take somewhere between 4 and 5 days, maybe a sixth day on the next week to get through all of these questions with the focus groups. Because again, with having that many different people from that many different organizations, that would be the slow part where we would have issues with getting everybody in the room from different organizations in different areas. Um, the things that we love about it is all of the images that you see inside of this are not direct images from uh, East
Normal stuff.
Palestine directly. They were all created within ChatGPT. Now, it probably went and pulled from the internet examples of what the hopper car track truck looked like for the entire bearing enclosure, and then how it broke it out. But it's one of those things that we actually learned so much about rail cars, communication systems, all of that by just doing 3 tiers of deep research and then slowly and feeding that into longer prompts to come up with the what happened and what should have happened so that we could create good, solid, unbiased questions that ultimately would lead to us getting into probably 11 to 12 deep-seated root causes. And this is just guessing, right? We have proven in the past that we can do a phase two approach to this where we could go get AI to give us a single line or a dual line of questions to 95% probability to kind of give an answer to kind of show you more. But that with there being 187 questions, that's a lot of work to go back and do. But if that's what any of these people are looking for, we can easily do that. But again, that's just an example of what we can do. And then the other thing is the titles. Again, each of these are tailored to this organization. Y'all have seen that in your organizations. Tailoring them is super simple. It just depends on what you want to have under there. So again, program process procedures, the human machine interface, incident manner control, because there was a lot of communications and public warning issues, environmental working and cleanup, and then public health and safety, and then finally the regulatory oversight. So again, overall, we can't do anything without the information. So I would still be slow data gathering because this was such a large event and they go and they forensically gather all this data. So that would still probably still take the 1 to 2 months. But at that point, once they had all the data, we could easily do this and within by month 3 be in and out for the most part. And we could start making changes so the trains that just derailed recently would potentially not happen because we would have put some measure in place to fix it. So I know most of y'all are bought into what we do. We just wanted to show you what a super wicked problem looks like, and how you would approach it. So if you have any questions for us, we'd love to talk about it. Again, we're doing this in our spare time just because we're interested in it, and it shows what we can do and our capabilities because we haven't been tasked to do something this large yet, but we're able to do that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chad. And as we really demonstrate our capabilities, and we are talking to executives. In fact, one of them is tied to CSX, another major railway company. I think the value of having us as a reach back organization is really evident. So if they were to be in touch with us right at the onset of one of these serious incidents, we could tell them with the information that we would need to go gather, right? So we can organize it on our chart. And they could take whatever time they needed to get all this information to us, and we would rapidly organize it. And then begins the analysis, whether with artificial intelligence, whatever is available to us, we would analyze and get ready for phase 2. The whole point of phase 1 is to come up with those deviations, non-conformances, non-compliances, what didn't work well. Those are symptomatic of something deeper. We generate our very focused, unbiased questions, everything tied to a specific regulation, program, process, procedure, requirements, Pareto chart, fault tree analysis, survey, something concrete that can stand up in a court of law. And that's where we get our questions, and that's where we generate our strategy for the focus groups for phase 2. So we were tied in at the onset. They would not waste months and months and months that I truly believe are wasted, running around with your heads cut off as to what do we need, who's doing what, how many independent investigations are you launching, how many rabbit holes are you chasing, how many tails are you chasing. Just this is why it takes organizations 12, 18, 24 months to do something like this, and we will be doing it in weeks, 2 months. So I just wanted to make that point.
If I have anything to do with it, Rob.
Andrew, sorry?
Days if I have anything to do with it, Rob.
Yeah, days if we tie in some artificial intelligence here.
Well, I mean, really, like what AI is great at is looking through large volumes of data and coming up with themes. So no, it's not going to solve your problem, does not replace the human in the loop, doesn't replace the the intuition. I can tell you, I manage 20 agents right now, and they make mistakes like every employee you've ever hired. Seriously, they're no different than, maybe a third-year employee, but they can go through a corpus of 2 gigabytes and give you an answer in 15 minutes. And that's pretty incredible asset.
So why don't we tease that right now, Andrew? So Andrew is going to present next month at the National Forum. And in case you didn't know,
I'm so ready.
Andrew Davies is a super guy. He's an angel investor. I don't know how many.
Not anymore. Not anymore. I'm not. I should
tell you.
Oh,
now you're focused on this. All right. So
100%. I would have used the other background for on memory, but I didn't want to. It's too bright.
So here's the thing. Andrew just launched a product, and we're not going to tell you what it is yet, but you got to tune in next month to see. But Andrew, how about a teaser of what you're going to be sharing? And it's something powerful.
Well, Rob, as you know, I did some experimentation with some data that you had, and wasn't perfect, but damn good for 15 minutes.
Yes.
I've been training a series of agents on Claude Opus 4.7 to do coding, but mainly the big thing is a deterministic memory substrate. So the problem that you have with AI is AI will infer things. And if I'll share a short adage with you, think about you're playing the telephone game right? We've all played that, right? You pass the message around. But this time, you're going to put the original message in an envelope. And so every time you pass the message, the person also passes the original message in an envelope that's hidden. The envelope is a deterministic source of what the original statement was. It's deterministic. It's exactly what the statement was. What happens through the circle of the, I don't know if I'm doing this right, through the phone, through the phone game, is an inferred version of the message. And so we all know what happens in a telephone game. You get back a message that's completely different, and somebody opens the envelope and goes, oh, wow, look at that. It was actually the dog jumped over the fence, not there was a dog dead on the fence, or whatever the story came out, right? And so that's what I do at On Memory. I am a mathematician in a way, like it's another kind of a Renaissance guy, and I developed patents on a 8-dimensional geometric object called the E8 Gossamer lattice. And that helps me find deterministic coordinates for data in microseconds. And so because of this formulaic, advantageous object, I have built a memory system for AI that can literally remember bit exact what was said or what a document said, and without the inference. So it's not perfect, still working on it, but very helpful in cases like with what Blue Dragon does so well. First of all, this whole seminar today was like fun with chemicals and analysis, right? So, the cost of a mistake is so huge, and we track it down. What is it, like a $50 part, like a bearing, or maybe it's a $1,000 part, right? But whatever, we track it down to this one thing. That information is valuable, and I'm not so interested in the profit as I am saving people from having trains crash and spill out toxic chemicals. So I'm talking to Rob a lot, and I'll tell you why. It's not just because I'm interested in building AI about what he does, but his process actually comes into my own programming. Yes, Rob, I have borrowed from BD2 and developing procedures for my AI. And Rob doesn't realize how brilliant he is, so I will stand up and tell the world, this is a brilliant man that has developed a brilliant system that not only works in root cause analysis for accidents, but it works in root cause analysis for AI.
Okay, with that, does anybody want to invest in the company? Let me see who else is in the room. Oh, we got Bechtel in the room, and Los Alamos is still here. We got Brad. Did you finish your lunch, Brad? It is 1 o'clock in California, so this is right at lunchtime. Lunch and learn, right? What did you learn today, Brad?
Oh, I'm envious of the amount of tokens that can be consumed out there because I maxed out mine far too frequently. It's super frustrating.
Ask around some people in the room here and max out every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 4
but
times.
A few of us have actually broken AI. We broke it. We broke its spirit. It couldn't do it. We had to rewind, start over. But yes, we are running hard. In fact, today we spoke to the chief of staff for an executive, actually the CEO of a company, and they're just now getting into AI, and they're a serious, large 3,000 employee company, and they're really just starting to figure out how to use it. And they have their own internal large language model. They also use Copilot, and I think it was Anthropic. But there's companies out there that are running hard towards AI, and if they're using it for problem solving, really they have to tread cautiously because there's the willingness to jump straight from the problem and all the evidence, let AI digest it, and then let AI spit you the answers, what the causes are and the recommendations, and that is not right. You can't skip phase 2. Humans in the system is where you're going to get the right answers. AI is not going to give you the answers because it's not speaking to the humans in that particular company or those involved in whatever you're investigating. So that word of caution, and we had a really great dialogue this morning. But we would love to be a part of all these initiatives to strengthen complex problem solving with AI and have us as the reach back for your biggest problems. And of course, bring in our training as an enterprise solution.